I've sort of become enamored with this notion. Well, I'm always temporarily enamored with things, but the notion that the only way to reform an organization is with pressure or heat, and applied a lot of heat. But the bigger the organization, the longer it's been around, the more successful it thought it was, the harder it is to make those kinds of changes. And the changes, remaking an organization is a multi-year event, right? Even like a division in a large org. I've worked at 3 or 4 places where we've done major change or we've tried to make major change, and it's really interesting. And typically, it's got to be some deep financial thing or some major structural effort. Like I worked one place, and we decided we were going to a bank. We were going to close our data centers and move to the cloud, and we used that as a leverage to cause all kinds of change. It changed the skill sets of people we changed, and worked another place where we did the same thing. It's changed the skill sets we needed, it changed the type of people we needed, it changed the responsibilities of what we needed to do. There are a bunch of things we thought were core we walked away from with no loss. And it's really interesting. And the notion is, and the analogy works pretty well. We need a crucible. We need some thing to happen that causes us to melt down the existing part of a generic, right? Like if you think of the way a metal bar works, you can kind of bend a metal bar and it'll snap mostly back unless you break it completely. It'll snap partially back to shape. And organizations are the same way. If you try and make change happen and you're subtle about it in some cases, especially if they're big changes. I mean, you can do subtle changes, but if you really need something to happen and you just kind of tweak it, what'll happen is the metal will fight back. I did this other one, white blood cells attack or something like that. And it's the notion that the org will naturally snap back to its previous shape. And so that means we need to apply a lot of heat, right? You'll have to, like at the senior level, you're going to have to just throw ideas out, throw new endeavors out, just kind of overwhelm the ability of the existing systems to operate the way they did. And you have to push that all the way down to the team level. One of the places these kind of big changes fail is, I've seen it a couple of times, we do it tactically up to, teams of 50 or 100 people, and the organization is thousands of people, and the executives and the middle management don't agree on the way you've gone, and so these bottom-up things will die. And then you see it at the top, where executives will come in, they'll make change, and they will try and do turnover in places, they'll try and retrain, and they may not hang around long enough for it to actually happen, right? Like you can't just flash melt the metal. It's got to go in the furnace, and it's going to take a while for that thing to melt down, and then you got to figure out what kind of mold you're going to want to put together. The other thing you can kind of see sometimes in this notion is that you have some piece of metal and you made it hot, and you want to add some new behavior, right? And the right way to do that is in a metal is to melt it down, pour another metal or other pieces into that, and turn it into a new alloy that does something different. What we do in company changes is a lot of times we will melt it down a little bit, piss off a bunch of people, pour some new metal on top, and then we'll let it run for a while, we'll let it cool down, and then sometimes winter is coming. And that fault line between those two pieces, you'll see this in a purchase, right, an acquisition. Those two pieces of metal will split from each other, and one will fall off, and you'll end up with a lump that looks very much like it did. And you see that when companies buy other companies, they try and make it fit, and then 4 years later, they spin it off again, right? It just refractures. So really, I think, the question is, what do we need to do at the senior level, and what do we need to do at the tactical level? I'll do those in another talk about some different ways that can be done. But again, and one thing I want to point out, these kinds of major changes really impact people. And we don't have to be assholes about it. Oh, I'm not allowed to say that. We don't need to be buttheads. Am I allowed to say butthead? Anyway, and the point is, we can still treat people like people. Like, people can be retrained. People can go to other places. We can we can do something. But when you melt the metal down, there's always something that falls out. And there are people that resist. There's certain specs that won't work in the new alloy that need to be filtered out. And so that process needs to be figured out at the strategic level, and then we need to figure out how to drive people at the bottom to melt into this new thing too, and hopefully we can talk about that another time. I'm trying to keep this one under 5 minutes, and I hope you have a new and flexible, warm day where I don't know what I'm saying. You know what? Have a great day.